Thank you for tuning in for today's video. This video was originally recorded about 10 months ago, and Bitcoin Ben was the one who commissioned me to do it. He paid me to put together a video about voluntarism. He knows that I'm a voluntarist and it's something that I'm outspoken about, so he asked me to put together a video for his Patreon channel. Again, it was recorded 10 months ago. I'm going to leave the video intact exactly how it is. Just wanted to add this intro. So again, I am a voluntarist. I do talk about voluntarism. And in case you want to know a little bit more, this is the video that will hopefully educate you about what voluntarism is. Thanks for tuning in. And obviously, I am not Bitcoin Ben, but Ben did ask me to make this video. If you're unfamiliar with who I am, my name is Rice, and I'm with the Rice Crypto Show. And me and Ben, we've been friends for quite some time. We've done some content together, and we share a lot of the same viewpoints and ideologies. And he asked me if I would do a video explaining what voluntarism is. So that's what this is about. You can find me on YouTube and on LBRY, LBRY. And I encourage you to subscribe to my YouTube channel and also follow me on LBRY. The reason why I'm pushing the LBRY platform is because my channel was one of the affected channels in the crypto YouTube purge. We're dealing with a lot of censorship and shadow banning, and anything at any moment could happen to my YouTube channel. So LBRY, LBRY is going to be my backup, and I encourage you to follow me on both. Now, if you're unfamiliar with me as a content creator, I talk about cryptocurrency and blockchain technologies. I also talk about economics. In addition, I talk about anarchy and voluntarism, which is what we're going to talk about today, and something that I call practice change. Now, with practice change, this comes from the quote from Gandhi, "Be the change that you want to see in this world." And that's what I try to do. I try to be the change that I want to see. And I do that by learning from what I do every day, whether good or bad, or positive or negative. And I feel like we want to change the world with technologies like cryptocurrency and blockchain. But if we don't evolve as humans, we're going to continue having the same problems just with new technology. So I encourage people to be the change as well. I encourage everybody to practice change. And it's a philosophy that just is all about being a better person. Now, that's where anarchy and voluntarism come into play. Anarchy, real quick, is a completely separate topic, and maybe I'll do a video about anarchy for Ben. I did do one on my YouTube channel, but it's not what most people think it is. The word anarchy comes from the Greek language, from two words. One, the word an, and the second word, archon. The word an means no or without, and the word archon means rulership or authority. So anarchy literally means without authority, no rulership, self-sovereign. And self-sovereign is something that we're going to get into talking about voluntarism. So voluntarism is very important to me in all these ideologies, and so I wanted to get into it. So what I'm going to do first is just kind of define what voluntarism is. Now, it could be with or without the Y, but it's always with an A. It's not with two E's. It's not volunteering. It's not volunteering at all. It's voluntaire. So what the definition of it is that it's a philosophy that holds that all forms of human association should be voluntary. That relations amongst people should be by mutual consent. So it doesn't argue for any specific form that voluntary arrangements will take place, only that force be abandoned so that individuals in society may flourish. So people cannot be coerced into freedom. Just think about that. Coerced into freedom. So we should not and force our ideas on someone else. And in that respect, people shouldn't be forcing their ideas on us. So when someone is forcing their thought processes and ideas on you, then they're really being disrespectful to your rights, and they're not being voluntary in nature. So this needs to be uncoerced. It needs to be moral. So it needs to be an act of uncoercement. No force. It just has to be something that is mutually agreed upon. Freedom of choice is a necessary ingredient for the achievement of virtue. And I'm going to play a video here in just a moment about the golden rule. For those of you who may be Christian or believe in spirituality and things like that, from the Bible, it's Matthew 7:12. It reads, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you." And in modern terms, treat people how you want to be treated. And you can flip that around. Don't treat people in ways that you don't want to be treated. Now, all of this you might be like, well, why are you doing a video about this? Because most of our interactions that we have in our daily lives are voluntary. They are by consent. In the particular instance of this video, Ben asked me if I would do it. I agreed, and I'm making it. And here it is that you're going to be watching it. So that was a consensual agreement. That's a voluntary act. So most of the time, I'm going to say that what we do in life is voluntary. Now, unfortunately, there are those who take advantage of other people's rights and force themselves on others. And some of those things can come in forms of theft, bullying, violence. So these are some things that you could take in consideration. But there's more to this, and I'm going to get into this. But real quick, I want to play this video about the golden rule, which is like kind of the number one rule of life. And it's really beyond everything. It's kind of the center point of what voluntarism is, the golden rule. So we're going to go ahead and do that video right now.
Rule number 1, the golden rule. This rule has also been called the ethic of reciprocity, which states one should treat others as one would like others to treat oneself. Or as you've no doubt heard it said, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. This is essentially why we have traditions like exchanging gifts. There is actually a second part to this rule that is considered cautionary. One should not treat others in ways that one would not like to be treated. This portion of the golden rule is also known as the silver rule. None of us want to be lied to, cheated on, or stolen from, so it makes sense for us not to lie, cheat, or steal. Though often claimed by Christianity, many other religions got it right too. The concept of the golden rule is found in writings of Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, Zoroastrianism, Christianity, Baha'i faith, Brahmanism, Judaism, Sikhism, Islam, Brahmakumaris, Theosophy, Unitarian Universalism, and even Scientology, just to name a few. In my opinion, any other rule is completely redundant. If you're following the golden rule, you're following every other rule out there. So put the gun down and step away from the stripper. Think about things before you act, and try to remember you're surrounded by others who deserve to be treated exactly the way you want to be treated.
So again, you might be saying to yourself, I know all this. This is stuff that I don't need to watch a video about, but I promise you that there is a point to this. And unfortunately, not everybody knows this. Not everybody was taught things the right way. Not everybody knows the same things that you know or that I know. So we got to take that in consideration. Also, I mean, you can just see what's going on around the world. We don't live in a world where the majority of people are respecting everybody's rights on a full-time basis. So, you know, some people need to be reminded of these things, and I wanted to emphasize what the golden rule was because it kind of goes into more about what voluntarism is, so I can explain two of the main principles here in a moment. But as a term, it was coined in usage by a guy named Auberon Herbert in the 19th century. And then later it gained renewed interest in the late 20th century, especially by the Libertarian Party in the United States. Now, Ron Paul was running for the president and with the Libertarian Party, and he used to be with the Republican Party as a I believe, congressman in Texas. And he wrote a book called In the Fed. And in a lot of his news appearances, he would talk about the term voluntarism, and it became very popularly used amongst libertarians. It also gets used amongst people who call themselves anarchists or anarcho-capitalists. It just kind of goes hand in hand with those ideologies and philosophies. So the principal beliefs of voluntarism stem from the principles of self-ownership and non-aggression, the non-aggression principle. And I'll explain both. I want to give kind of a definition and I'll kind of break it down. Self-ownership, also known as sovereignty of the individual or individual sovereignty, is the concept of property in one's own person, expressed as the moral or natural right of a person to have bodily integrity, be this is a hard word to say for me, I don't know why, inviolability of the physical body, and be exclusive controller of one's own body and life. And it emphasizes individualism. So really what this means is that as individuals, as a self-sovereign person, that you have a natural right to be in control of your body, your private property, that no one else has the right to be able to tell you what you can or cannot do with that or force that upon you, that you have self-ownership and you're also responsible for your actions. So on the flip side, yeah, you can choose to do what you want as a self-sovereign individual, but you got to suffer the consequences, which is where like good moral action kind of comes into play. Natural law, these are like the basis of just the natural God-given rights that we were born with, not the things that the government says that we're allowed to have, but the things that we were born with, these rights, and to have self-ownership of your body and complete control of your body and your private property is an important element and one of the main principles of voluntarism. Now, the non-aggression principle is exactly what it sounds like. It's an ethical stance asserting that aggression is inherently wrong. Aggression is initiating or threatening any forceful interference with an individual or their property that causes harm, suffering, or loss. It does not forbid things like being forceful in a way of defensiveness or self-defense if you're trying to protect somebody or things like that. But just outright just attacking somebody, that is completely uncalled for. It's immoral. You should not be violent towards somebody. And so practicing the non-aggression principle and not forcing yourself on anybody in any way, I think is an important thing. If you remember the phrase from, I believe it was during like the Revolutionary War or Civil War times, it's called the Gadsden flag, but the phrase "don't tread on me," that really does encompass voluntarism. Individualism, self-reliance, independence. That's what "don't tread on me" is, and that's really what voluntarism stems from. So force is not justified. In fact, it's immoral, and unless it's in defense of some sort, like I mentioned, that makes sense. You don't have to you're not violently defending somebody. You're just using force to defend somebody, and sometimes that's what situations call for, because unfortunately some people disrespect other people's rights. And if you see a woman being attacked, mugged, a guy, whatever the situation might be, you should try to come to their aid and help them out. And again, I know this sounds like basic common sense stuff that we apply to our daily lives, but here's the big kicker, okay? We make this exception that we unknowingly allow to continue. It's called the state. And most people refer to that as the government or countries or nations. So why allow it to continue? Like, I don't get the disconnect where the government can make rules that they don't have to follow, but you do. It's okay for the government to violate the non-aggression principle. They granted themselves this legal moral right to use force against innocent people. It's ridiculous, and we've been conditioned to think that government in the form as the way it exists today is what we need. And I beg to differ. And if you study history and you look at what our founding fathers, the framers, and all these people were thinking when the nation was created, they didn't want the federal government to be as large as it is today. The whole idea was that states were supposed to govern themselves, and everything would be state and local and broken down, which makes sense, and that the federal government would be there to protect individual and state rights. But instead, the federal government has grown into this monster, and that's a completely another long conversation. I am going to have an appearance from Adam Kokesh coming up in this video, and both myself and Ben interviewed Adam Kokesh. He's a libertarian who's running for president. His platform is to dissolve the federal government and end the presidency and get everything back down to state and local levels. And when you really think about that logically, getting things down to state and local levels, these are actually, this is a better way for us to be able to live. And so it's something for you to consider. I'm not going to go into all the specifics of how this can be achieved. I do encourage you to check out my interview with Adam as far as like how we would take in consideration of things like police, military, hospitals, firefighters. So, like I said, all this sounds like common sense stuff. But we let the government do the opposite, and we allow it, and we think it's fine. I've always had a confliction growing up about, because I was raised a Christian. I know I quoted the Bible earlier. I was raised a Christian, and I definitely follow Jesus. I don't identify with the church today, so I can't agree with that. But I was always taught that murder was bad. One of the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not kill. And then I'm looking at war, and I'm like, well, how does this work? How can thou shalt not kill, but yet it's okay to go to war to kill people, but it's not okay to just kill somebody? And really, it's the government has conditioned us to think this is okay and make us think it's patriotic and things like that. And a lot of times when we're going to war, in my opinion, it's senseless. And all it's doing is hurting the people who are involved in the fight, and the people who are caught in the crossfire and all that. And I know that's just a completely another situation, but to give examples of what I'm talking about with the government violating voluntary ideals and beliefs. Taxation, that's a perfect example. It's not voluntary, it is mandatory, and you can be imprisoned or fined if you don't pay your taxes. And you might be saying to yourself, well, taxes are important. And I'm not even getting into that conversation right now, because right now our form of taxation, in my opinion, is theft. The majority of our tax money is just going to pay the Federal Reserve for interest of money that they're printing up that we don't ask for them to print. Federal Reserve is not part of the government. There is federalism, Federal Express. Right now, they've got us in a lot of trouble economically. Today is Monday, March the 9th. This video will probably be out in a couple days. Today, the stock market actually halted for 15 minutes. The system was going to crash. The Dow Jones last night, the Dow Jones futures were down 1,000 points. Today, everything was down over 7%. It's getting crazy, and the Federal Reserve is saying they're going to do everything that they can in their power, and they're using the excuse of what's going on as far as this pandemic, this Wu flu. Don't want to say anything that's going to cause any problems because the YouTube algorithms and all these algorithms of social media, but it's not looking really pretty, and financially we're in a bad position. Economically, globally, it's just not looking good. And I think that these voluntary values are very important, and we need to start treating people as we want to be treated. So as I mentioned, in my opinion, our current system of taxation is theft. The money's not being used properly. The revenue is not being used properly. The majority of it's going to pay interest to the Federal Reserve. Taxation of our labor was not even a thing until 1913, and that's the same time period that the Federal Reserve was created. Now, is that coincidence, or what? So, some people don't even know their history, and when you think about our taxation system, people are paying taxes. So if you think about you working for an entire year, 5 to 6 months of your earnings are going straight to just pay for taxes. It's completely ridiculous. And with taxation, myself personally, I wouldn't have a problem if they were voluntary, and that I would actually know how the funds are being used. So if we had things broken down to state and local levels, and we're in this area, we've decided, because you can automate Congress, we've got blockchain, we can change the way governance works in a way that everybody can participate with and not need these figureheads, this bureaucracy that we've been dealing with. So, imagine that, X amount of dollars is going to be spent to improve the area, and everybody's going to contribute based off whatever they earn or whatever the contribution amount might be. But you get to choose how you want those funds to be allocated and know how those funds are going to be used. That's a very powerful thing, and I would love to be able to see us get to that point. If we can enable blockchain-based voting and automate Congress and actually let people's votes count, so that we can actually do what people want. If we can get things down to state and local levels, I think that that's completely possible. So that's something that people can take in consideration. Excuse me. Another example is any law that does not have a real victim. How can it be just or moral if there's no victim involved? A lot of people say no victim, no crime. But you're seeing all these people being locked up and put into jail and prisons for victimless crimes, and it's completely ridiculous. It's almost caveman like. It's like medieval time stuff. We need to evolve and get out of that mindset. Alcohol and drug prohibition, where they say what you can do, what you can and can't put in your body, even though you own your own body. And I'm not agreeing or saying that drugs or alcohol are good or bad. I don't agree with certain things. I don't think drinking excessively is good. But the point is that as the owner of self, as a self-sovereign person, as having possession and ownership of your body, that you should be able to have the freedom to decide what you are going to put into your body. You should have that right. And that's the double-edged sword of freedom. If we truly want freedom, you got to think about this. You're going to have to be accepting of other people and what they want. And if you don't agree with it, you're still going to have to be accepting of that, because that's what true freedom and true voluntarism is. You don't have to agree, but you have to accept it, and you got to do your best to respect other people. I think that's super important. We're forced to participate and pay in government programs like Social Security against our will. They take it out of paychecks. We're forced to fund the military, whether you agree with what the military does or doesn't do. Some of your tax dollars and stuff like that are going to fund in the military in a lot of aspects. And some of these things may be necessary, but why do we need to be coerced and forced? Why can't we figure out a way to make this voluntarism? So I think that this is something that I really would like for people to consider. And so when I decided to make this video, after Ben asked me to do it, I reached out to a couple people that I knew were voluntarists, that I wanted to get their point of view from. I asked them to make a quick video for me, whether it was after an interview that I did or something that they did on their own, of basically saying, what is voluntarism? and what does it mean to them. And I had Adam Kokesh, who is a presidential candidate with the Libertarian Party, had Roger Ver. Some people know him from Bitcoin Cash. I also had Dmitry Buterin, who is Vitalik Buterin's father. Vitalik Buterin is the creator of Ethereum. His dad is a voluntarist. And then I took a video from YouTube from Larken Rose. If you're not familiar with Larken Rose, it's LARKENROSE. I'm going to be trying to interview him soon. Definitely check out his YouTube channel. He's got a really cool series called Candles in the Dark. He talks a lot about what anarchy is and voluntarism is, and explains a lot of this in a lot greater detail. He's got a book called The Most Dangerous Superstition. That's a great book that I encourage people to check out. And he'll teach you a lot about voluntarism. But I had the three individuals that I mentioned first do something specifically for this video, and then I took that piece from Larken Rose. So I'm going to go ahead and show that now, and then we're going to get into some more stuff about voluntarism right after this. So enjoy.
Voluntarism is the idea that all human relationships should be free of force, fraud, and coercion. In other words, voluntary, that is, peaceful, cooperative, and nonviolent. This is basic human ethics. Don't lie, don't hit, don't steal. Now, the reason this is an important idea is not just that we live in a world where we don't yet have a firm common understanding of ethics, but we live in a world dominated by governments that are fundamentally involuntary in nature. That is, that they are coercive, they are violent. They demand your obedience, and if you deny it to them, they will force it out of you. So to apply this to the world that we live in today is incredibly important, and I would say the most important thing that we can do to stand up to injustice. Looking around the world, 90% of the violence that we see is done in the name of government. And of the remaining 10%, 90% of that is directly caused by government in the drug war, the war on poverty, and all of the ways that they create desperation and provide a legal system, not a justice system, but a legal system that provides not accountability, but escape from accountability for so many bad actors. For me, this is the cause I've dedicated my life to. I wouldn't want to serve any other message or any other idea, because I think this is the most important one for humanity moving forward right now, embracing justice and creating a better world for everyone.
Hello, I'm Roger Ver, the founder of Bitcoin.com and the first person in the entire world to start investing in the cryptocurrency ecosystem. But today I want to talk about a thing that's very important to me called voluntarism. So the idea behind voluntarism is that all human interaction should be on a voluntary basis or not at all. And that stems from each person owning their own body and their own life and their own destiny. And so my life and my body belongs to me, and your life and your body belongs to you. And anytime I interact with you, I should be asking you, hey, would you like to do this? Would you like to trade that? Would you like to do something? And so, for example, if I asked you, would you like to go to dinner with me? You can say, yes or no. And if you say no, that's fine, because it's your life. And that's pretty much how every single person and every single business and everybody deals with everybody all the time. Every restaurant and bar and online website, ask the customers, would you like to buy our product? And if the customer says no, that's fine, right? When a man asks a woman out on a date, she has the right to say no. If a company asks someone, would you like to work for us? The potential employee can say no. So that's how everything works all the time. But the consent is what really makes things different. So the difference between making love and being raped is consent, right? When it's consensual, it's a beautiful, wonderful thing. When it's involuntary, it's called rape, and people go to jail for it, right? Having one person pay money to another person, when it's consensual, it's called trade or commerce or buying or selling things. When it's non-consensual, when it's not voluntary, it's called theft, right? If a mugger comes to you on the street and says, "Give me your money or I'm going to hurt you," that's called theft, and we know that that's wrong, even though the only difference is that one's voluntary and one's not. So the difference between working for a living and being a slave, right? One is voluntary, one's not. So the difference And things being voluntary and involuntary in human relationships are incredibly important. When it's involuntary, it's things like rape and murder and slavery. When it's voluntary, it's things, like making love, having a job, or, whatever the other one was, my example there. And so, like, when it's voluntary, everybody knows it's just fine. So, like, imagine how mad people would be if Starbucks, rather than telling everybody, hey, would you like to buy our coffee? We would like you to buy it. And instead of telling everybody that you can say no, Starbucks says, if you don't buy our coffee, we're going to come and, steal your car or take your house or lock you in a cage if you don't buy Starbucks coffee every day. People would be furious at Starbucks. Yet that's the exact thing that government does, right? They tell everybody all the time, hey, you have to buy this government product, and if you don't, we'll throw you in jail, right? Or we'll take your stuff anyhow. Yet somehow people seem to think that it's okay when government does it, whereas if a private entity did that, they would be furious over it. And I think the real answer is that it's not okay when government does it. It's just that people have been brainwashed from a very young age into thinking that it's okay when government does it, because they go to the government schools where they teach everybody from a young age that everything the government does is just fine. So anyhow, I think people should stop and take a look around the world and ask themselves, is what's going on voluntary, right? The military draft is another example, right? The draft, everybody's taught from a young age, is a good thing, but if you stop and think about what it is, it's the moral equivalent of kidnapping and slavery. And we all know kidnapping and slavery is wrong because it's involuntary, right? The draft is morally wrong because it's involuntary as well, and just because they do it under the guise of patriotism with flags and fancy costumes and this sort of thing, it doesn't make it okay. So anyhow, I'd love to see more people around the world stop and consider, is this a voluntary human interaction? And if the answer is no, it's probably not necessary and probably should be condemned. So anyhow, just wanted to share that information for you guys. I guess I'll see you some other time soon. Check out Bitcoin Cash if you like the ideas of voluntarism or cryptocurrencies in general. That's why I've been involved in this so long, because I want to spread the ideas of voluntarism and free markets, because they make a world a better place for everybody. And the most excited about Bitcoin Cash because I think it has the best chance out of all the cryptocurrencies out there to bring more voluntarism and free trade and free markets to the world. But give whatever's useful to you in your life a try. I'm not forcing anybody to use Bitcoin Cash. I'm asking people and inviting them to, just like Starbucks. So thank you all so much. See you next time.
Yeah, I mean, for me, voluntarism is a philosophy of life. It's really about who decides for me what I want, and then how do I get it, right? Because if I'm a child, my parents tell me you should eat this, you should not eat this. If I'm an adult, I believe that I should have the right to decide what I want to do and what I should not do and what not, right? I don't want the government telling me you should not be eating cheesecakes because they are bad for you. Let me decide for myself, right? Maybe I will eat cheesecake once a month, maybe I'll eat them every day. That's my choice. And my choices, they have consequences, right? So being an adult for me, it means that having the full ability to make decisions and then having full responsibility and accountability for the consequences of those decisions, right? That's kind of one aspect of this. Another aspect of this is human life is all about interactions. We are not self-sufficient entities. We exist in cooperation and collaboration, right? I'm doing my stuff. Somebody is, farming vegetables. Somebody is building houses, and then we all exchange our services and whatnot. So voluntarism for me is the system when we all trying to freely and openly negotiate. I want this from you, you want this from me, let's find a fair way to exchange so that you benefit from this interaction, I benefit from this, right? Without any of us being forced to win, right? So without any violence or threat of violence. So that's kind of the way I think about it.
Voluntarism. I see. Here I am assuming I'm talking mostly to voluntarists. Voluntarism is, well, it can be with or without the Y. It just means advocating a society in which all human interaction is voluntary instead of violent. And that rules out government, because government is always inherently violent. So voluntarism is just more precise and more specific version of what I believe, more precise and specific than anarchism. Anarchism means no rulers. Technically, you can be an anarchist who runs around chopping people up with an axe,
as long as you don't advocate a ruling class. You can't be a voluntarist who runs around chopping up people with an axe, because that's not a voluntary action, which is one reason that the term voluntarist is better, but it's also something nobody's ever heard of. Yeah, a list of words. I had one of them at one point, like a list of the terminology that the term, basically the lexicon of political mythology and what the terms really mean. Oh, there is that in The Most Dangerous Superstition. In my book, The Most Dangerous Superstition, it goes through a bunch of the terms that statism relies on and then what they literally mean, and how just the connotation of those words, law, crime, authority, law enforcer, government, all the things that convey something other than a literal description of what it really is, prison, and there's a bunch of them. I don't have it in front of me.
So I hope you have found value in a lot of the things that I've said, and in addition to what Adam Kokesh, Roger Ver, Dmitry Buterin, and Larkin Rose had to say in regards to what is voluntarism and what does it mean to them. I think they had some really important things to say, and they kind of clarify it in other words to kind of give you a better point of view of what voluntarism is. Now, a few things that I had found in my research in regards to voluntarism and government. I wanted to read a few things, and then I was going to do a little bit of a wrap-up conclusion to this video. So voluntarists reject the use of political power because it can only be exercised by implicitly endorsing or using violence to accomplish one's ends. Power to compel people to control other people's lives is what political power is all about. It violates all the basic principles of voluntarism. Might does not make right. The end never justifies the means. And nor may one person coercively interfere in the life of another. Even the smallest amount of political power is dangerous. First, it reduces the capacity of at least some peoples to lead their own lives in their own way. And second, what it does is, to the person wielding the power, it corrupts the person's character. You've heard the saying, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Unfortunately, in a lot of cases, things like that are very true. And if one man or person's freedoms or private property may be violated, regardless of the justification, then every person's freedom or property are insecure and at risk and can be violated as well. So that's something that I want you to take in consideration, because if you're familiar with the George Orwell book, 1984, it looks like we're starting to live in that world. It's getting crazy. So I want to go ahead and do my little wrap-up conclusion for you right now. So in conclusion, I thought it would be fitting to end things with an article from someone that calls themselves the philosopher. She is an anarchist and voluntarist, and she has a YouTube channel called The Philosopher, and this is called The 4 Foundational Principles of Voluntarism. So first off is self-ownership, and this again wraps up and concludes everything that I talked about previously in this video. So self-ownership is the cornerstone to voluntarist values. It is the axiom that states that each person is the highest authority over their own body, and that each person has the greatest claim over what happens with it. While there are many thought processes by which this concept could be derived, a simple observation on the nature of human action makes it clear. The brain's exertion of impulses on the body demonstrates that individuals control their own bodies and direct its course by a biological default. People act accordingly from the sensations of this exertion, both in inclusion and exclusion. If this axiom is accepted as to humans, it develops a solid logical basis from which to describe the other properties of voluntarist thought. So self-ownership. The non-aggression principle. is the idea that stemming from self-ownership, individuals should not initiate physical harms against others and should only use force if necessary in self-defense, as I mentioned. As individuals have the highest claim to their body, no one has the right to use force to tell others what they can say or do with their bodies with self-ownership in mind. If individuals respect the bodies of others, fewer conflicts will emerge. Now, these are two things that I didn't really mention in the video, but again, I think it kind of wraps up and encompasses everything that I've been talking about. And that would be maximizing individual consent. The consent of maximizing individual consent is the notion that permission to the body or property of another is predicated on attaining consent of the individual. For example, this is the difference between an act of intercourse being categorized as sex or being categorized as rape. With the norm of maximizing consent, principled voluntarists seek to enhance the accuracy of consent through specific observations, actions, and words to further understanding, looking to ensure that individuals are respected in their decisions to either join or to abstain from the activities of others. It is an encouraged social norm. Generalized collective consent is rejected as lacking individuals' conscious decision. For example, government, which is the claim to the bodies and properties of others through a single or small group of mandatory automatic rulers, is viewed as violative of consent to the extent that rule and control does not require individual consent. The accuracy of consent's manifestation is increased with proactive communication, market technology, and scientific discovery. So I'm hoping that maximizing individual consent is explained very well here, because I thought she did a great job. And then minimizing the initiation of violence against others. It's the idea that conflicts should be resolved as best as possible without increasing the damage and harm originally caused. For example, if a child tripped or stepped on your toe, it would be escalating violence to shoot the child in the head for this accident because it causes more damage with intent than the original action. So minimizing the initiation of violence is a conscious effort to avoid initiating violence against others and to look for opportunities to de-escalate furthering physical harms where possible. Voluntarists consider how they can ask permission and communicate their wants and needs and seek to better resolve disputes through reason rather than through physical force. That's really important. As you have heard now, the core principles of voluntarism revolve around the idea of consent, its manifestation and acceptance. Anti-ethical to individual consent is the nature of government. And this is what I was trying to make with the whole point of this video, is that government does not seek out individual consent. They claim to own the bodies and properties of others by default with automatic mandatory rulers. You own your body. You are your own. This is your body. This is my body. Okay, this is not yours. This is mine. And so we have self-ownership, and this goes into self-ownership. Government seeks to minimize individual consent in favor of collectivism and maximize the initiations of violence by justifying theft by unilateral decree. And that's why you look, a lot of people who are libertarians, anarchists, voluntarists, say that taxation is theft. It goes into this whole form of what government does with forcing things, mandating. Basically, if you don't participate, you will go to jail. You will be fined extremely heavily. If you want to instill a sense of voluntarist values in your life, you must start with love and empathy, as that is where voluntarism springs from. Okay? And that goes back to the golden rule. And this is all about practice change, being the change that you want to see in this world. If you love yourself, you can empathize with others. I'll repeat that. If you love yourself, you can empathize with others and how they would want to be treated as you do yourself. You can start reciprocating voluntarist ethics. So I think it's really important that you take these things in consideration. Voluntarism is a very, very important part of my walk with practice change, my path of change, of being that change that I want to see in this world, along with anarchy, of not having rulership and being self-sovereign, being, as a voluntarist, self-ownership, and participating in the non-aggression principle, and really trying to truly treat people how I want to be treated. And unfortunately, the government does the opposite. I'm not going to get into all the specifics, like I said. There are ways that we as human beings can come together and figure out better resolutions. We've been conditioned all of our life in school by television, and they call television programming for a reason, because we've been programmed, and there's a lot of brainwashing, subliminal messaging, and all that going on. So people like myself, Bitcoin Ben, lots of others, man, we're just trying to wake people up, trying to help uncondition the conditioning that everybody's been conditioned with. So again, it's been a long video. If you've never checked out any of my content, I do encourage you to subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow me on LBRY. Make sure you hit the like button on all my videos, comment, and share, because that's really important to help other people to be able to see the information in the YouTube algorithm. Definitely check me out on LBRY, LBRY. I'll be adding exclusive content on that platform. I am trying to get my Patreon channel going on. So if you guys are watching this on Patreon and you like what I'm doing, you can support me on Patreon as well for just $5 a month. Once I get enough people on Patreon, I'll start becoming more active. But right now, I've only got a few people who have committed to being patrons on my Patreon channel. So I'm going to go ahead and end this video the way that I always end all of my own videos, and that is, I encourage you to be the change by practicing change, and I love you all.